Hey, ik heb iets leuks voor je. Ik heb namelijk een 100% plantaardig, eiwitrijk weekmenu ontwikkeld en deze kan jij gratis ontvangen. Ga hiervoor naar mijn website www.lobkefasen.nl of klik eventjes op de link in de show notes. Scroll een klein stukje naar beneden en laat daar eventjes je voornaam en je e-mailadres achter. Ga naar je mailbox om je e-mailadres te bevestigen. Let op, deze kan in de spambox belanden. En vervolgens ontvang je helemaal gratis het weekmenu in je mail. Iedere dag bevat minimaal 90 gram eiwit en de recepten zijn makkelijk te maken met ingrediënten die je gewoon kan kopen in de normale supermarkt. Dus geniet van 21 plantaardige recepten en tag me zeker even op social media als je iets hebt gemaakt. Hi, ik ben Lobke Fasen en ik ben diëtist. Mijn expertise ligt in volwaardig plantaardig eten en duurzame voedselkeuzes maken. En al jaren coach ik mensen naar een leven waarin ze door meer plantaardig te eten een betere gezondheid krijgen. Met een gezond gewicht, meer energie en het belangrijkste als je het mij vraagt, meer zelfvertrouwen. Of je nou al jaren plantaardig eet, zoekende bent in de wereld van voeding en gezondheid. Of gewoon nieuwsgierig bent naar wat een voedingspatroon met meer plantaardige voeding voor jou kan doen. Welkom bij mijn podcast, waarin ik je meeneem in mijn groene gezondheidsmissie door je te informeren en inspireren over een gezonde leefstijl. Je na te laten denken over duurzaamheid en je te helpen in je persoonlijke groei. Dag lief luisteraar en leuk dat je weer luistert naar een nieuwe aflevering van deze podcast. En dit is part 2 van een podcast die ik heb gemaakt over het Danish Plant-Based Action Plan. Als je hier nog niet van hebt gehoord, dan raad ik je aan om eerst even naar de vorige aflevering te gaan, nummer 120, die ik opnam met Rune-Christoffer. De Danish Plant-Based Action Plan is namelijk een overheidsplan waar ontzettend veel budget voor is vrijgemaakt in Denemarken, waarmee ze de plantaardige transitie echt op een super praktisch niveau een enorme boost willen geven. Echt een heel progressief plan. En toen ik hierachter kwam en ik toevallig van plan was om toch al naar Kopenhagen te gaan om de marathon te rennen, heb ik contact opgenomen met Rune-Christoffer om te vragen of ik misschien met hem in gesprek mocht hierover, om wat van de best practices mee te krijgen en te kunnen delen met jullie, zodat we daar allemaal van kunnen leren. Nou, en ik was meer dan welkom, dus die podcast is opgenomen. Maar hij zei toen al over de mail van, joh, sinds je een diëtist bent, ik denk dat je heel erg op je plek bent bij mijn collega. Zij heeft namelijk een PhD in nutrition en haar naam is, en ik hoop dat ik dit goed uitspreek, het is Deens, dus bear with me, Katrine Ejlerskov. Ik denk dat het zoiets is. Ik zei van, heel eerlijk, dat lijkt me hartstikke interessant. Want inderdaad, zij kan nog meer vertellen over echt het voedingskundige stuk en hoe het nou praktisch in zijn werk is gegaan. En implementatie. Ze wist ook heel veel van nudging, zei hij. Dus ik zei, dat klinkt heel interessant, maar kan ik jullie niet gewoon allebei spreken? Nou, dat was geen enkel probleem. Dus, so we did. Ik ben in Denemarken gegaan. Eerst de podcast opgenomen met Rune-Christoffer, excuus. En die aflevering kan je dus luisteren. Ga die ook echt even eerst luisteren, want dat is wel echt een leukere volgorde, denk ik, dan dat je eerst deze luistert en dan de andere. De aflevering met Katrine, die zou ik ook in Denemarken opnemen. Maar helaas door omstandigheden is dat niet gelukt. En toen zei ik van, joh, ik vind het zo jammer, kunnen we hem niet alsnog gewoon online opnemen? En dat is dus gebeurd. Dus de opname is online tot stand gekomen. Maar de inhoud is net zo waardevol. Ze deelt echt hoe ze dit nou in de praktijk hebben gebracht. Haar rol hierin. Wat dit praktisch betekent. Misverstanden waarmee ze te maken krijgt. En heel veel over nudging. Hoe kan je nou iets op een positieve manier brengen bij de populatie? Hoe ga je om met weerstand? Een heel mooie aflevering geworden. Ik weet zeker dat als jij hier naar luistert, of je nou je persoonlijke leven hiermee te maken hebt, of juist meer in een werksetting, dat je hier heel veel aan gaat hebben. Dus heel veel plezier met de aflevering die ik opnam met Katrine Ejlerskov. Well, thank you so much that we can still record this episode this way. I'm very happy that I can speak to you about part two of this plant-based action plan, and a little bit more, even more targeted to my main audience, I think, which are like healthcare professionals or people that are curious in plant-based nutrition.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It's a pleasure
and
to be here.
let's start with you as a person. So, can you briefly introduce yourself a little bit? Like, what is your role within the Vegetarian Society of Denmark, and how did you end up there? What is your past in this nutrition field?
Yes, sure. So I've been in the Vegetarian Society for almost 7 years, and I have a background in research within nutrition. Um, with lots of statistics, epidemiology, focus on obesity, how can we help people in that sense? But I've been a vegetarian since 2009, where I worked in a professional kitchen. And suddenly it just hit me that I was working with with these mussels, cleaning them, putting them into the boiling water, and I don't I've never liked killing animals, so then even though I was uh, what do you call it, educated within nutrition, lots of focus on like the meat and the vegetables and all this, suddenly it just hit me that maybe I should become a vegetarian. So I've been that ever since. And I really care about the plant-based transition. So when I was between jobs, I contacted the Vegetarian Society and asked if
Hmm.
there were any positions. And we found out to create like an internship. So when you're between jobs in Denmark, you can have an internship that is paid for 4 to 8 weeks. So then I was introduced to the society and the people there, and I really like them. And I like the work of creating more change in the in real life, so to say, instead of writing scientific papers and spending a lot of time with that. So I started there, focusing on how to introduce more plant-based in food service, in retail, and also with our nutritional work. So very broad focus. Um, and yeah, ever since it has become easier to get funding. So we have grown in number. I was number 6 that was employed,
Yeah,
and
that's
now we
something
are
you.
29.
Yeah, that's something I hear every time. Even when I spoke to Rune, you're very proud of that. You're expanding
Yes,
and
yes,
expanding.
yes,
That's
yes,
very
exactly.
good. That's very good.
Since we create all the what do you call it, the positions ourselves, then it's
Yeah.
quite a task. Yes. And now, within the past 1.5 year, we have a real nutritional team. So that's also great. And we can do much more. There's so much to do with the plant-based nutrition. So I'm really pleased with focusing on the special needs that can be in different groups, and what kind of supplements and how to recreate a healthy plant-based diet and all this. It's
Yeah, and I think especially when you're a vegetarian society, just from my own experience, it's of course it's so important that we combine those things like the health part and the like the practical part of the cooking and how to make it a proper meal, but both from taste and from nutrition side. Because if it doesn't taste good, people won't eat it. But if it's not healthy, people won't sustain on the long term, of course.
absolutely,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Well, that's very good. Well, let's make a little step to the plan-based action plan because that's what I'm specifically very curious about, and people can already hear in the podcast I recorded with Rune-Christoffer about what it actually is. So I will link it in the show notes if people haven't heard it because it's an amazing action plan. Maybe you can briefly give an introduction about what this plan exactly is and where it started, so people have a little idea in case they haven't heard about that in the previous episode.
Okay. So Rune-Christoffer would definitely be the best one to more explain
Definitely.
detail. But we have had the politicians in Denmark, or the government in Denmark, have created this plant-based action plan together with some of the other parties. And basically, it's saying that plant-based foods is a part of the future. So really embracing that this change needs to be done. And they have made some visions about what can be done. They also described some of the things that are already being done. So I think it has been a bit criticized maybe for not having concrete targets and also having maybe enough goals following or money following the goals. But it is really a great thing. We have had based on the action plan, we have had even more money coming into this plant-based funds that is uh, put down from the government, and that has also created quite a lot of really nice projects within our association, but also from other actors in the whole value chain within the plant-based agenda. So a lot of money is needed to create this change because we have great. Our food system is kind of built around the animal-based production, and to create these changes, let's say instead of creating um, animal feed, then to have it in like the quality that we need for the human production, and also product development and all this is and there's a lot of work to be done. So this action plan and the plant-based fund it's critical to create this change.
Yes, yes. Well, and from what I've heard, you are a little bit more involved in the practical implementation of the plant-based yeah, meals, getting it into institutional settings, such as schools, hospitals, canteens. And first of all, I'm curious about how these institutions have responded. As in my experience, the Netherlands, it's often challenging to get the staff on board.
Yeah. Well, I've worked with food service, retailers, and also nutritionists all along. And definitely the food service part is the most, I mean, that's almost an open door, so to say. It's the most open door at the least. So I think when we talk to chefs, when we talk to managers, I mean, they're more open to create this change, and it's easier to do it in a kitchen compared to in a retailer. So the retail sector has been quite I don't know, conservative, or it's more difficult to create change there. And that's actually
Skeptic,
where we
maybe.
skeptic. I mean, because the consumers are not Danish consumers, even though we might think that they're more progressive due to the plant-based action plan and all that, they're quite conservative and still hang on to their meat and traditional food culture. So but here we actually look a lot into what's happening in the Netherlands with the retail sector there, with the
Oh,
goals for changing the protein shift
yes,
to more plant-based foods.
yes.
But here it's from our work here in the food service, we have positive experiences with working targeted. So, for example, we have a project that works in festivals, how to
Hmm.
create more plant-based foods at music festivals and other kinds of festivals. So, having one person really look into that and getting specialized in how to build the menu, what kind of food is suitable at festivals, how can you name it so that it sounds good when you're a little bit drunk and young people being at festivals and all this. We have another project looking into like sports and fitness. And another one looking into takeaway foods, food on the go, and what kind of products and what kind of problems, barriers are present at these places. And I think that's what we've been able to do much more with these funding that has come from the government, for example.
Yeah, and you mentioned a few things I'm actually a little bit more curious about now. First of all, you mentioned traditional diet of the Danish population. What is the traditional diet there? What is it? Is it very the same as Dutch. Yeah, you wouldn't know that, but I can make an assumption.
Well, it is quite heavy on meat, and we call it like white food. So it's like potatoes, meat, some kind of sauce, and then you have some boiled vegetables maybe
Oh,
in the.
that sounds very
Yeah.
Dutch.
Okay. Yeah, but I think what happened back in we had the Eat Lancet coming out in was it 2019, and then we
Yes.
had some dietary national dietary guidelines in 2021, where that has actually been quite progressive.
Yes, it's
Um,
very progressive. I know it actually. It's pointed out in several podcasts as a very progressive guideline if you
yes,
compare it to other initiatives in the world.
yes, and that helps us quite a lot because one of the we need to eat all Danes need to eat twice as much pulses compared to meat. So, and that's also pulses would also be a big part of the plant-based diets.
Yeah,
Um, so I think this is definitely not a cultural thing. We're not used to eating pulses, maybe a little bit of hummus, maybe a
yeah,
little bit of falafels, but not really.
yeah.
There is a big focus on getting all Danes to eat more pulses and cook with pulses and all
Yeah,
this.
yeah, and you said traditional diet, and I was thinking a little bit about what we discussed before the podcast actually started. Like, is it a traditional diet like after the 60s, or is it like the
Mm,
traditional diet like for decades and decades and decades?
no, no, it's after the 60s.
Yes, I
Yes,
thought it
yeah,
already.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the same as in the Netherlands. Before it was more probably potatoes also, and
Yeah, we
yeah,
also had quite a big pea production actually back in the days, and we have some traditional, like very way old traditional dishes with the yellow peas and there's lots of potatoes.
yeah,
Um,
I
but I
understand.
mean, still, the vegetarian society in Denmark was introduced or back in 1897, I think. So we are like 128 years old. And
Yes.
back then, it was also, I mean, a struggle because there was this impression that healthy foods, or if you were ill with tuberculosis or anything, you should have like strong food with lots of
Yeah.
dairy and meat. So,
Yeah, which kind of makes sense knowing what they knew back then, and yeah, it's was more like a problem where the malnourished was of course
mm,
more of a problem than being overnourished,
mm,
um, but still not valid. But I it made sense for me at least in that time frame. But nowadays it's the other way around,
there's so
where
many, yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
where it's more like obesity and heart disease, which are the problems than being undernourished. And another thing I wanted to point out, you were talking about the festival thing, and you said something like, yeah, how to name a dish to make it more attractive. Can you tell a little
Mm.
bit more about that? It's probably not the vegan salad of the day.
No, yeah, this is a very big thing. I don't know how you name dishes in the Netherlands. I lived in England for some time back in 2017, and I was so impressed with how they could like name products, name dishes, like in much more appetizing way that I got curious to try these new products. And in Denmark, we are so I don't know. It can be like a vegan stew of the day, or it can be like a vegetarian sandwich. And the truth is that you have no idea what you get. So
Yeah,
so we focus a lot on how to why not describe what you actually get? What ingredients, what sourcing, what spices, how was the food prepared? There's so many attractive words that you can use to describe this dish that will make people also with the meat eaters. I mean, even though you're a meat eater, you might not want to eat meat at all your dishes, but it needs to sound um, like it's an interesting, appetizing meal and filling meal that you get.
do you have an example already of a success story of certain dishes that didn't sell with a certain name, but they did with another name? Or
Well, yes, I have from that's from a retail sector where I have concrete numbers. I know that there was a food company here selling vegetarian lasagna, and then they changed the name to spinach and ricotta lasagna, and
ah,
the and the sales increased by 200%.
whoa.
Yeah. And actually, the same numbers happened when they changed from, I think it was veggie roll or something, and then they changed it to hummus and falafel roll. Big increase in the sales. Um, I know my colleague who's working on the festivals has a lot of concrete examples, also with some numbers on the naming of dishes in these food stalls, but I don't have them with me right now.
Yeah, but that's an exciting job. I want to do that job, being
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
festival.
yeah.
Wow.
He's
Okay.
out all summer.
Yeah. So what we learn from this is what I hear is that it's better to be very specific about what you sell
Mhm.
and what people get. So what did you say? Vegetarian lasagna, and then spinach and ricotta lasagna, so people know,
Mhm.
oh, spinach ricotta. That's of course less or more specific than veg or vegetarian lasagna. Yeah, what do you get then?
Exactly.
You only
What
know
you
there's
get.
no meat in it, but you don't know what
Uh,
is in there actually.
Yeah. So really focus on what you get instead of what you don't get. And
Exactly.
it's the same if you call it meat free or if you call it like a just healthy dish or a low fat dish. I mean, it's not really appetizing, is it? You really need the
Yeah.
kind of craving words.
But what I also know from research is that it sometimes also has to do with the fact that people think, "Oh, that's not for me," because I
Mm,
know, for example, if you put gluten free on a packaging, yeah, I don't need to eat gluten free, specifically me. So that could also be like that. I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's not for me," you know. And that's the same
mhm.
with vegan. That's a word that I'm attracted to, but I can understand that if just some random consumer walks to the supermarket, it's not even that I dislike it. It's just like, oh, that's not for me. I'm not the audience.
Mm,
So vegetarian lasagna, I can imagine that people, it's not even maybe about, oh, I dislike that dish. It's just not, I'm not the target group.
absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. And I think actually in Denmark there can be quite a negative notice on being, I mean, if something says vegetarian or vegan, people would dislike it for that. So we could open the mind of many more people if we can just name them differently.
Yeah.
So, but that's also what we focus on in some of our food service work is on how to build the menu. Because if you have the vegetarian dishes in a box for itself, then it is really only for people identifying as vegetarians or vegans. But if you include it in the menu, maybe having it on the top and in the bottom,
Oh,
where
make it
people they
part of
yeah make
everything.
yeah then it's more normalized.
Yeah. I know they also did some tests. I think it was in Netherlands where they put the meat replacer or the mock meats, I mean, just in between the real meat. And
Mhm.
then people were more likely to buy it because it was just next to the meat from animals.
Exactly, yeah. And I know that there's some of our followers, some vegans, vegetarians also, when they go to the supermarkets, they really like that these kind of products is at a special section in the supermarket. But if we want flexitarians, meat eaters also to find it, they shouldn't have to go to a certain
Yeah.
area in the supermarket. We really want it to be a part of the like normal food supply where all the consumers pass by.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Also, I think because of people maybe not always know what they can do with certain products. And that was also a
Mhm.
discussion when I don't know exactly if this was a Dutch thing or a European thing, but I'm definitely sure you are aware of that like lobbying of the meat industry and the dairy industry that they don't want those plant-based alternatives to be called like schnitzel or we call it
Mhm.
schnitzelgate actually. And also like the oat milk was no longer allowed. It had to be
Mm.
called like alternative for dairy or something. I think even that wasn't allowed at a certain point. I'm not really sure about the rules, but
Oh.
anyway, you know about this discussion, I
Mm.
think. But then, of course, people, if you have to call it like plant-based pieces, yeah, what do people need to do with that, you know? But if you can call it plant-based mincemeat, that it's even next to the mincemeat from animals, then people understand what they can do with that product. So that is also why it's important, I think, that it's just in between all the other products and it
Yes,
normalizes it.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And let's make a little step to healthcare. Are doctors, dietitians, and other healthcare professionals generally positive about this initiative? So I'm talking again about the plant-based action plan and implementing it also, because people often are enthusiastic if it's not really not in affecting their work. But are they
Yeah.
really enthusiastic?
Well, I don't know from a health professional view. I don't think it kind of hit them yet.
Ah,
I know that I think many dietitians or research. I mean, all people that have some focus on the dietary guidelines would also think that this is really important to create this change toward more plant-rich diets. Um, but I don't know if, I mean, for doctors or other healthcare professionals, it hasn't really kind of gotten into the way of work life or yeah.
yeah.
But for us, it's definitely now a focus area where we've got some funding, so we can look much more into how to create this change, how to implement. Actually, it's just for our view, let's start with implementing the dietary guidelines so that health professionals, doctors, and others can work much more, have it as a part of their focus area to work for prevention and have focus on how diet can actually have a great impact on people's health.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that because with the guideline, because I immediately think indeed about the fact that you already have a very progressive guideline since, or let's say an up-to-date guideline since 2021, I think you said.
Yes.
Um, and then it's so much more easy to say, hey, but this is just the direction we should go. In the Netherlands, the guidelines will be updated probably this year, but we
Oh,
still have to deal with the guideline from 2015.
oh, okay.
So you can imagine that makes it way harder
Mm.
to. I'm very curious about this update, and not I know I'm not the only one,
Yes, yes.
but that will make things harder or easier. Will be very weird if the guideline will be like even more heavy on meat when all the guidelines are progressing in Germany, Austria, Finland,
Mm.
Denmark. But that makes it, of course, way more easier to say we're not doing something actually progressive here. We're doing something that we should be doing because look at the guidelines.
Exactly. And I think I mean, I'm a vegetarian, I eat mostly vegan, and the dietary guidelines are plant rich. You still, the
Yeah,
dietary guidelines in Denmark, they still promote 350 grams of meat maximum per week, but 700 grams of cooked legumes or pulses per week. But still, if you look at the dietary patterns for a whole population, if you really want like most people to eat as with the dietary guidelines, there will be like a normal distribution around those. So when we have this goal of the dietary guidelines, then you will also have quite a lot of people that will need to eat much more plant-based because there will still be special groups. There will still be conservative, maybe older men and
yeah,
other people who are very sports active, where there's a lot of focus on getting a lot of animal products still. So you really want this distribution um, around the goal for the dietary guidelines. So it also helps our work with the vegetarian and vegan diets to have it more accepted and something that we need to focus on to how do you guide people for the best, very plant-rich, plant-based diets.
yeah, yeah. I think what you mean is that some people have to do a little bit extra because other people
Mm.
will be a little bit more conservative or in
Exactly.
yeah for a longer time. Yeah,
Yeah.
and what are the biggest misconceptions you think about plant-based nutrition regarding health that you have to encounter sometimes, and how do you address them?
Well, in Denmark, there's a lot of focus on the protein quality and protein bioaccessibility. So
Hmm.
much do you get when you eat plants compared to when you eat meats or other animal foods? So there is, I think, a lot of nutritionists and others, maybe at the hospitals, specifically, but also other places. There's a lot of focus on what we miss out if we cut down on meat. and not so much focus on all the great things that we get when we increase the amount of vegetables and pulses, fibers in our diet. So I think that's definitely a thing. And also, as we just briefly talked about before, there's a lot of focus on protein-rich products in the supermarkets, and there is this hype around eating protein-rich diet, but of foods. But I mean, Danes, we eat plenty of protein, so focus should be much more on do you get enough fibers? Do you get all your vegetables? Did you get your pulses today? But that's not what we see in the supermarket, but also for this focus on protein quality, getting enough proteins from the health professionals.
And how do you encounter that when people come with that argument? Because I have to deal with that argument also very often, and the protein quality and the absorption. And I always try to explain that the main problem there is if the protein intake is very low, then it becomes more important to combine, to make a complete or a nourishing amino acid profile. But if you eat way more protein than you already need, which most people do, but I have to say, especially when people start eating more plant-based and just cut things out of their diet, but they don't put something back for it yet, then you can get a little bit low on the protein, and then it becomes a struggle when you have to make those calculations with combining and stuff. But if you eat enough in itself, then it's less of a problem, of course. But how do you deal with that argument?
Well, it's definitely a balance because as you say, I don't think it's difficult to eat healthy plant-based diets where you get enough protein, but still you really need also to guide people that, well, please eat your pulses, to eat whole grains, nuts, seeds, and eat a varied diet, so that you do get what you need through the diet. And also we just had a project with with hospitals and elderly people where it is also a challenge because they have the dietary guidelines for these groups are quite a high amount of protein compared to the energy. So it has to be very nutrient dense. So we did some both vegan, vegetarian, but also plant-rich recipes for these groups. So I think that's more of a work in progress where we, compared to what they're used to serve these people, it's much more plant-based or plant-rich, but still we have slower progress in order to do it responsibly.
Yeah. What I get from this conversation already is that we should talk way more about what you gain and what you actually should eat instead of what you shouldn't eat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very important to be much more focused on the positive gains that we get. And also another thing that is one of the things that I deal with is a lot of people are quite skeptic on the fact that if you eat vegan or vegetarian diets, you should probably take some supplements. Fortified products are not a big thing in Denmark. So we have lots of organic foods. So for example, if you buy let's say an oat drink, if you buy it organic, there won't even be calcium in it. So you really have to think of do I get my calcium? How do I get my B12? Do I get enough selenium and these things?
Yeah.
But the thing is that I haven't been taught, no nutritionist has been taught in what do the animals get. So I really looked into this topic, especially last year when I had what do you call it, a vet with me for an internship with a vet, and we looked into what do the pigs get and what do the chickens get, and the truth is that they get significant amount of vitamins and minerals supplemented to their feed as well. So some people think that it's artificial to supplement a vegan diet with let's say B12 and selenium and vitamin D. But the truth is that if you eat animals, you get it indirectly because they don't live a natural life. Um,
Yeah.
so
They will be deficient also, and so
if they
will be
didn't
their
get
end
these,
product. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
if they
Yeah.
didn't get the supplements, or yeah, then they would be deficient. And
Yeah, actually, I think I read that the main buyer, I think I should say, from those supplements is the animal agriculture industry, and it makes sense because there are way more animals, of course, than there are human on the planet.
wow,
Uh,
yeah.
and it's so funny you say the oat milk example. I have to say because when I was in Denmark and I stayed at my friend's place, this is exactly what I pointed out to him because I noticed he eats mainly plant-based, as far as I know at least. And he had the organic oat milk in his fridge. So I said, "So are you aware that you don't get any calcium because it's not fortified?" And now you mentioned it's more common in Denmark that things are not fortified. So I got some pictures like, is this correct? I said, this
Mm,
looks better. But yeah, not
yeah.
everybody has a nutritionist staying in their home for 10 days.
No, no, that's it. And we really want, I really want, when people shift into plant-based diets, of course you sh it shouldn't impact your health in a negative way. So we
Yeah.
have also quite, we want to say that shift to plant-based diet. It's really good for your health. It can help you. It's not that difficult. I mean, you need to learn some different things to how to cook in the kitchen, but also take these supplements.
Yeah.
Because we want it to be like sustainable.
But
We don't want people to get osteoporosis or other deficiencies, iron deficiency or whatever. So really getting a focus on also how to implement new things in your diet.
But you don't talk to like the people that make these plant-based alternatives about fortification because it sounds like you say we try to educate people about
Mhm.
supplements, but don't you have the discussion like maybe we should fortify more because
That's
animals are fortified also?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's also a discussion that we have with the some politicians. We have it with there's this I don't know what's it called in English, this branch initiative for the producers
Hmm.
to have some common ground on what kind of fortification would we recommend. There's some issues with products being developed in Denmark versus exported also to other countries. So it's I mean, I think it's a little bit complicated, but we really would like much more fortification to be seen in the plant-based products because it would help people.
And why is it not? Is it a cultural thing, a conservative thing? Is it just they didn't think about it? Because in Netherlands, it's very common actually, only not for organic, but it has to do with their rules around organic, I think.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think it's a cultural thing, and we are Danes has also traditionally been quite open to vitamin pills, like a multivitamin pill in the 80s were so common. Um, so you have more control if you take it through a vitamin pill compared to if you get it through some fortified. Also, I couldn't see, let's say, all these products that are based on mainly pulses and vegetables, a hummus, would that be fortified? Or falafels? There are lots of people that avoid the more processed plant-based foods. Go for
Yeah,
organic, go for the vegetable beef or something like that,
yeah, yeah, that makes
and
sense.
they wouldn't get it either way.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting because, of course, you want people to eat more like the whole food plant-based diet,
Mm,
but those are the products you would not assume people would fortify indeed.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, then they won't get proper nutrition. And you also don't want people to think, oh, so I should have my meat for iron now because otherwise I won't get it, and or B12. And yeah, yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Makes me think a little bit about the discussion in Netherlands about the tax on the fruits and vegetables. I don't know how it is in
Mm,
Denmark, but in a lot of countries, I think it's tax free. In Netherlands, it's 9%. It's the lower tax rate, but still. And one of the reasons it's not because they talked about it like, shouldn't we go to a 0% for fruits and vegetables? But they can't figure out what is a fruit and what is a vegetable because like canned fruits and vegetables, is that fruits or vegetables? And
Yeah,
fruit juice, is that fruits or vegetables?
exactly. There's a lot of
Yeah,
categorization there. Yeah,
very hard.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, very interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about the nudging? How does it? What did you do regarding nudging? Maybe we should explain a little bit what nudging is first of all for
hmm
people, and how do you use it? And maybe you have an example, effective strategies, how you've applied it to promote plant-based meals.
Well, I really appreciate the WRI's report. It's called Playbook for Plant-Rich, I don't know, menus in the food service that we have been very inspired by. Talking a lot about there's so many different ways that you can work with nudging. Uh, we have focused a lot on the naming of dishes, on how to build the menu, how to talk about it, like storytelling from the kitchen and with the waiters. Um, and let me see, yeah, some other things. But how do you build up if it's a buffet, for example, how do you build it up? So we have some work on hotels and conference centers, for example, on where we also talk with the kitchen staff there and the waiters around the food venue or like food setting there. But there's also if you go some of the steps back, where you have the meeting booker, for example, how does she or he kind of talk about the menu that we have? We've tried to implement like plant-based default or so you could have if you book a meeting and the kitchen has this plant-based default, how would the meeting booker or meeting seller present that? It's very it has a lot of impact on if the meeting booker would actually choose that option.
Yeah.
Um, so I think yeah, there's some really interesting things there, and we still see. So what one of the things that we did was to have free options, so you could have um, like traditional meat-rich menu for your meeting. You could have like what most people would eat. We tried to really work on how to name it. I don't remember how we ended, but like in the middle, you would have this. We recommend our climate friendly choice, and then you could have the whole plant-based, and where we really wanted to direct people towards the middle version because we thought we're still baby steps here. It's
Pragmatic.
still but pragmatic, yeah. But if we can at least get people to choose the climate friendly version where you could have it plant-based, but then have meat added to that. That's very interesting.
And it really worked if you said climate friendly, because I can imagine in the Netherlands, a certain part of the
mm.
population will be immediately like, I won't want the climate friendly.
Yeah. I can't remember how. I think we described it more. We described it in another way, but I can't remember. Yeah.
It was
How?
pointed out as the preferred option, at least.
Yeah, something like that. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But
Okay.
it's definitely, I think also that's also one of the points that we experience from being out there is if you say something is climate friendly, that's not really what you want to think of when you have to choose a meal. When you choose a meal, you want to think that it's delicious, the chef has really created something
Yeah.
here that you want. It's not because you think of the whole world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, but it's also interesting these days how even choosing a plant-based option becomes political.
yes,
That's very
it's
interesting. It's funny to me and sad at the same way that if I ask some person in Netherlands about their diet, you can kind of already, especially if they point out certain things, a little make an estimation where they would be on the political spectrum.
mm.
That's very weird, actually.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting that when we do some surveys, we can see that actually more than half of the Danes they would like to reduce the amount of meat that they eat,
Yeah.
and there's been some interesting studies from company called I Not You, where they did at some conference centers. They shifted it around. So you had when you signed up to the meeting, you had to say half of the people said there will be a meat-rich buffet. If you want vegetarian options, tick here. And then they shifted it around and said there will be a vegetarian buffet. If you want meat, tick here. And it was like the numbers where they could shift the amount of people kind of choosing the vegetarian or not choosing directly the meat was impressive. It went from, I think it was 6% that actively ticked the vegetarian box to 86% that did not tick the meat box.
Yeah.
So because people would actually like to have, I mean, they don't care if there's meat in all their meals, but the thing is, if there's a vegetarian buffet as a standard, they think the impression will be like this is normal, this is what all other people choose. The kitchen probably thought a lot about creating some nice meals, and that's where they go with the flow. So
Yeah, and
so
it also has to do with the fact, I think, with some psychological thing that people just want to be as most people do.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, they don't want to be like with smoking they did, you know. Nowadays it's the norm to stand outside and smoke your cigarette
Mm.
there when you're on the birthday party, and then you're a little bit of the losers.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think some of the experience here is that if you do that kind of thing, you should have some dialogue with the kitchen beforehand. So you make sure that the chef, because the chefs are still very traditionally trained, so they would maybe still think of a menu where you have the meat in the center, then they would take away the meat, put some kind of oven baked vegetable in the middle, and it's just not as filling as it would have been otherwise. So, as the organizer, you should have a dialogue with the kitchen to ensure that it's still, I mean, created as a fully filling, nice plant-based dish. And then people maybe want meat on the side, but it should stand out on itself because
Yeah.
otherwise people they might choose the vegetarian option the first time, but if they feel they don't get satisfied or they need to top up with chocolate afterwards,
Yeah.
it's not a good experience.
Yeah. Actually, as it was in the 50s, just as a luxury item.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for explaining that. I have some last questions, a little bit more about the future. What do you see as the biggest opportunity to further integrate this plant-based action plan into healthcare and institutional settings? Because as I noticed, it's not there yet, but I hope you
Mm.
have some plans.
Yeah. Yes, so we got funding now from some international funds, especially Climate Works, Donea Effectief from the Netherlands, and also private donation and EIT. So we are creating right now a knowledge network for plant-based health professionals because I think one of the problems here is that you can have people sitting very alone around and maybe being passionate about more plant-based foods, but having this network around it and getting much more knowledge out there around how plant-based food can help on different kind of diseases or through prevention, that will be really good. We look very much into what's happening internationally with PAN, for example,
Yes.
but also some of the other network for plant-based doctors or
Yeah, the Physician
um,
Association for Nutrition, I have to say.
yes,
Yeah.
super. Um, and we think that having this approach that it's not they're very pragmatic in this field. So what we're working on implementing the dietary guidelines. It's not what can be seen in some eyes as it's not extreme. I mean, sometimes if we talk too much about vegetarian and vegan, some people it will be too much for them because their patients, the citizens are not there. But talking about the dietary guidelines and this shift is, I mean, it's the first step and it can actually really create a change. Um, yeah. So so we really look forward to go much more into this. I know there's a lot of doctors out there and also other health professionals that would love to be able to have much more focus on this, but they need, maybe if they have 15 minutes with the patients, they need much more hands-on guidance or help on how to introduce this conversation. What should the patient do first? And really like help on the implementation part.
Yeah, perfect. Well, wonderful. Well, last question then, if you have any ideas. How can otherwise, maybe the Netherlands, learn from the Danish approach, do you think? Are there specific lessons or best practices that you can share? What could we implement here?
Well,
Where should
I
we
think,
start?
if you can get the political system with you, that's definitely. I'm not working with the politics, but when my colleagues, they have, I mean, with the diet, with the plant-based action plan, or the lots of millions of funding that got, I mean, that's really making my work easier to
Yeah.
to.
Well, our politics, our coalition recently fell, so maybe
Yeah,
we can
I
have
read a little bit.
when we have elections and we vote better, there's some chances there. But
Yeah.
yeah, but the action plan in itself, so starting with the government is what I hear a little bit like you, that helps a lot.
Well, that if that can facilitate that, there will be more money flowing into the area, because I think what's for my work, it's become much more easier since I got more colleagues that can be specialized in different areas. And I think one of the thing that I love that my colleagues can be specialized in, let's say, festivals or meeting facilities or the hospitals. They can go out, they can have dialogue meetings with people who might have their arms crossed, but they meet a person who is prepared, who knows about their area and can talk into the barriers and why. Let's say you have a meeting with a shawarma restaurant, but you can tell them these are the products that are there. You could try with this dressing. You can try with this kind of naming on the menu. Then you can really get much more people. A lot of people are willing to try. They, they, I mean, if they can get their customers also to embrace it, then of course they would love to do new things.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. That was so interesting, and I really learned a lot about how you really implemented this action plan in a practical way. Is there one last thing you would like to share, or are you like, no, I said it all?
Well, right now I think my head is full, but it was great to be with you here, Lobke, at the show,
Thank you.
and I hope you got some good inspiration out of it.
Well, at least I learned that if I ever get bored of my job, I start working for the festivals. That sounds amazing.
That's a good. Okay,
Thank you
right.
so much.
Thank you. Nice to chat.
Ja, en als je dit hoort, dan betekent dat je aan het einde bent gekomen van deze aflevering. Deze tweeluik over het Deense Plant-Based Action Plan. Ik vind het echt zo inspirerend om te zien hoe landen echt op een nationaal niveau vanuit de overheid zich hier zo voor inzetten. Daar kan Nederland nog veel van leren. Maar niet alleen Nederland als politiek, maar ook gewoon Nederland als in... misschien zit je in een bepaald bedrijf waarin je stappen kan zetten. En dan weet ik zeker dat je ook hier dingen uit kan halen die je kan toepassen binnen welke setting dan ook. Het zou zelfs binnen je gezin kunnen zijn als het gaat over hoe presenteer ik dan een plantaardige maaltijd. Want aan het einde van de dag is iedereen in Nederland ook een consument. Dus ja, daar kunnen we gewoon heel veel uithalen. Ik vond het heel erg leuk om deze 2 afleveringen te delen. Ik hoop jij ook. Laat me dat weten door de podcast waar dat kan sterretjes te geven. Bij mijn weten kan dat bij Apple Podcasts en bij Spotify. Je kan daar ook een reactie achterlaten bij Spotify. Ik reageer niet op alles, maar ik lees 100% zeker alles. Dus dat vind ik heel erg leuk als je een reactie achterlaat. Of onder de YouTube video. Daar kan je ook je reactie achterlaten. Ik hoop je natuurlijk weer te zien bij de volgende aflevering. En vergeet je niet te abonneren op deze podcast. Dat moet ik ook niet vergeten te zeggen. Abonneer je op deze podcast, zodat je geen enkele aflevering hoeft te missen. En heel graag weer tot de volgende aflevering. Bye bye!